Hey everyone. So today my goal is to give you the agency to take the trade. So a lot of the times in the group, I see a lot of people over trading chop, so much so that they get PTSD and can't take the actual good trades for themselves when the opportunities arise. But yeah, before I begin, be sure to like, subscribe, and yeah. So I'm trying to basically provide these as a resource for Brandon's BH Insights group, but I also do kind of want to grow my own sort of educational content because I think that I can provide some value. So I'm going to be going into like kind of a wide array of topics because a lot of the times I think that a lot of you approach it in the wrong way where you're starting to beat yourself up about every single failed trade and stuff like that. All right. So this was going to kind of be like a more technical video, and I think we still might go into a little bit of a technicality, but I think that but after trying to record a lot of the topics that I wanted to cover, I realized that a lot of those could probably go into like their more specific technical videos. So like things like knowing when to trade, how to identify chop, or identifying trends, how to size. I think ultimately, like, what this video should be is more uh, understanding your own psychology. Because the biggest hurdle to taking the trade by yourself versus waiting for external validation is you getting in your own head. There's certain elements of a trade that should exist before you take the trade. You need to have a thesis. What is your thesis? It can be a thesis based on like external events that are happening, macroeconomics, and all of that. And maybe you think that you have an edge in that trade, and so you take the trade. And how a lot of the people in our Discord group might choose to do it is also including elements of technical analysis and price action. And so that is a valid thesis. You think that it's going to go up based on the price action. You think it's going to go down. You think there's momentum. Having that be a thesis is one of the first steps, right? You think it's going this way because of this. So what you need to think of now is that you're willing to bet a certain amount of capital that the price will go in your direction and it might go to some target. So those are the next things. You need to identify your target and you need to identify where you're wrong on your trade. And so oftentimes you'll see this being like a prior low or a prior high on the time frame that you're choosing to do the trade on. So a lot of the times with perps, like you might choose to take the trade on like a lower time frame. And so if you think that your thesis has enough grounds for the price to move in that direction immediately or within the near future, like the next few minutes to hours, then maybe it's worth setting your invalidation to a local low on like the 5 or 15-minute time frame. So no disrespect to whoever showed me this earlier, but I'm going to be using this as an example. If you enter a trade like ENA, you identify during the market hours, right, that everything is euphoric and going up, and you decide to long it over here at 0.83, okay? The market plays along and continues grinding up, but there's a point where it kind of just starts reversing here. If you entered this trade over here, where would your invalidations be? Where would your targets be? What are you targeting? What is your thesis, right? Your thesis might be ENA has relative strength and they have the USDE narrative. So maybe a reasonable target for this, I'm going to say $1. Where are you wrong on your trade? Where are you wrong on your thesis that it's going to go up in the immediate future? Right? Because you're taking this trade on like the 5-minute time frame. You've identified local relative strength and you're wanting to follow it up because it's going to moon. So where are you wrong on that? I would say you're probably wrong on that thesis at the origin of the pump, which is kind of over here. You can also decide to use the local low, which could be arguably here or here. You can also, if you're really wanting to have a tight risk, you could even put it like over here, where it broke through these highs on the daily open. And so there's a lot of ways that you can kind of define your invalidations. But at some point, you need to have those invalidations, because otherwise it'll go way down. If you had your invalidation here, it would have been touched. If you had your invalidation here, it would have been touched. But if you didn't have an invalidation, look at how far down it went. It went down to 0.77 all the way from 0.83. Now that's still quite a lot. That's 7%. If you were using things like 2 or 3x leverage, now your position is down multiple of that percent. It's down like 21%. You could even be close to liquidation here if you didn't have a proper stop set. So this is one of the most important things, which is to really define where you're wrong on the trade, right? There's a hard level where you're definitely wrong on the trade. And then there's like soft levels where you might be like, okay, it's kind of wrong if it has any price action that touches this level, but I could give it a little more time to kind of try to resolve it. And so this is what we kind of talk about with soft invalidations and hard invalidations. And ultimately it is like still subjective, right? You can cut a trade really far before your hard invalidation and acknowledge that you might be wrong in cutting it, but you could always just re-enter afterwards, right? In this case, like you could have identified way before your potential hard stop over here, you could have identified that this is really weak. This is showing weakness after it was showing very clear strength here. And so now it's like weakness, strength, choppiness, and now another bout of weakness right after we got this pump to new highs. That's pretty bad. I think I'll cut it over here, right? Then you're limited to like a 0.33R loss rather than a full 1R loss. Or if you had your invalidation lower, for example, if you had your trade like this, you would have been able to cut your trade at like a 0.25R loss instead of at a 1R loss because you were too stubborn to close it out here. Or if you really wanted to give it a little more time to breathe, then you would have cut it like over here or so when you saw this candle wasn't reversing back on itself. So this is like important context to have for your invalidations, right? You need to have a point at which you're wrong on the trade. And you need to kind of approach this with some neutrality, right? You're not always going to be right on a trade. There's going to be time, like the market can do anything at once. The market doesn't have to follow your trade thesis. If you're wrong, ask yourself, did you execute wrong? Or was the market condition just not ideal? When you're wrong on a trade and you get invalidated, either at your soft invalidation, your hard invalidation, or maybe even your premonition to cut early, you should be asking yourself these questions, right? You should ask yourself, did I execute this trade badly? Was my thesis valid? Is there anything here that I could have done better? I always see a lot of you guys really having regrets about your entries, having regrets about not exiting on time, having regrets about the market just not going in your direction. And it's important to not always do that because the market can move however it wants to, right? And so if you lose a trade, you need to ask yourself if you did anything wrong, if the market just moved against you, or if there was anything that you could improve in your execution or how you set up the trade, or if your original thesis was wrong. Because there's times where I see a lot of you guys are blaming yourself when your setup was actually pretty good. It's just that the market didn't give you what you would have liked. And maybe you could have improved your execution in some ways, but the setup that you took was still valid. And so when you have that dichotomy of having a good setup, bad execution, then you're starting to wonder and think to yourself and mess yourself up for future setups because you're thinking that your setup was bad. But in reality, your setup wasn't bad, your execution was bad, or the market conditions were bad. And so being able to think about these things objectively is important for being able to really break down and understand your trades. In climbing, for example, one of the best pieces of advice for actually being able to read harder routes and climb harder routes is asking yourself, why did I fall off? Is there something that I can do to not fall off next time? Is there something that I can do to improve my movement here? I'm tired. Why am I tired? Am I executing my moves with the most efficiency, for example? And so a lot of these micro details start to add up, and this is sort of what you should bring to trading, right? There's a lot of things that can go wrong with your execution. Was your execution good? There's a lot of things that can go wrong with your thesis. Was your thesis good? Break it down. Was your technical analysis good? Was your overall time that you took the trade good? And so being able to ask those questions rather than ask yourself, man, the market's going down. Why is it going down? Those are bad questions, right? Those are questions that you blame yourself over. You want to ask yourself, why did you lose this trade without blaming the market, without blaming yourself? And then once you can do that, you really unlock a whole world of answers to those questions that really help you understand the trade better. It really helps you dig into the trade a lot more. And this is why journaling is so good, is you can ask yourself why. You can spitball why. You can maybe, like, however that is for you, right? Ultimately, a lot of your failures will lead into other trades if you're thinking that way. If you're stuck in the mindset that you lost this trade and there's nothing that you can learn from it, uh, and that your execution, you don't care about your execution, you only care that you lost the trade, like, you're not going to learn from that. You're not going to understand the trade at a deeper level. Another question that's important to ask yourself is, how were you feeling throughout all of this? Was there any part of your feeling that clouded your judgment for how you executed the trade? Did you exit the trade too early because you felt like you were losing too much? Did you exit the trade? Did you exit a winning trade because you felt like it was going down too much and that you couldn't bear to see it go in the red? Did you exit a trade early because you felt like it was too choppy? Was it actually choppy, or uh, were you fearful that it was choppy and you wanted to lock in some gains? A lot of these trades kind of feed into each other, because if you're not asking the right questions and understanding your psychology, then you're kind of going to let it impact the future trades. If you lost a lot, you're going to want to make it back a lot more. If you are trading chop for some reason, and you see it continues to go up and down, you're not going to be asking yourself the right question to really avoid the chop. And yeah, I think that there's a lot that I can really say on this, but the biggest thing is to kind of approach each trade pragmatically, without bias, and without judgment. And then I think that you'll be able to kind of ask yourself the right questions about if your approach to the trade was correct. And if it wasn't, what could you improve about different aspects of it? And I guarantee you that with every trade, there's going to be at least three things that you can change about how you took the trade, what your feelings were during that time, and maybe your invalidations. And things like that you can kind of put towards like improving over time. Um, I don't see these things as like small, minute technical improvements that you can make throughout the trade. I see these as large items. And then really just like taking all of your learnings and actually learning from them, right? A lot of the times you might have those learnings and then just continue making the same mistake over and over again. And I'll be honest, I do that too. I make the same mistake over and over again. But eventually, like when you make the same mistake that many times, you learn to not make the mistake. And once you can do that, once you can hone in and identify the mistakes and just tell yourself to stop making those mistakes, then you can start becoming profitable. I think mastering your psychology and really being able to break down a trade like this is important, because then it'll lead you to start taking better trades and experimenting with certain conditions and start to build your own system out based on the price action that you identify. And so I hope that knowing the outcome of what the trade can be, where it's going to be a learning experience for you, is something that allows you to really take the leap with the first step, to just take the trade immediately. And if you lose it, then it's a learning experience, right? If the trade is like an A plus setup and you're not taking the trade because you're scared, you need to stop being a pussy and take the trade, right? Because the worst thing that can happen is that you lose the trade and you invalidate yourself, and then you have a learning experience to figure out and dig into why you actually lost that trade. And if you're still scared, I do encourage you to try and just take the trade on a smaller size at least, and then have some sort of emotional investment in it and try to just learn from it, right? Was your execution good? Was your execution bad? You can also do this with your profit taking, right? It doesn't have to just be for your invalidations. Is your profit taking good? Did you round trip any? Did you take a good amount of profits? Did it go to your target level? Was your target level accurate? Could you have improved it? All of these things, like you can just ask yourself these things when you reflect on the trade afterwards. Sometimes a lot of things aren't under your control, like the target levels. It's not going to go to your target level all the time. how much you TP. It's subjective based on how much you sized in initially, how large your portfolio is, because like taking profits on the way up every single spike up is what I personally do, and I know that I can improve that over time, and I am. And I'm trying to figure out and just like mentally think through like all of these things and just improve myself over time. I'm not going to beat myself up for taking too much profit or taking too little profit off, because I know that I need to find that right balance, and I'm still working on it. And I'm going to ask myself, could I have been more opportune with it? Could I have taken more profits off? Could I have waited a bit more to take profits off? Uh, these questions are questions that I ask myself because I know that I don't have the perfect answer. And I do want to improve this part because I think that I can make more profit from it. So I think to summarize, the biggest part that I see as important with trading is being able to ask the right questions and understanding if your execution was good or not. And I think that you should avoid questions that are kind of like the questions that vary from person to person, like asking somebody where they TP'd at or how much they're going to TP at a certain level is not as productive as asking like what are their target levels and why. You could ask them like what is your general profit taking strategy to try to learn from them, but to ask them like how much percentage they've taken off by now at this point in time, that doesn't help as much. Something that's like questions about profit taking, that's very individual to somebody based on their portfolio size, how much they're comfortable with risking, and all of that. And it's very hard for you to just transfer that knowledge one to one, because for some people, they might take profits too liberally for you, and you're not getting as much money out because they're taking 2-to-1 trades and you're taking like 15-to-1 trades, and they're round tripping a lot and you are too, and stuff like that. They could have a completely different risk reward profile than you. They could have like a 5-to-1 risk reward profile and you could have a 1.5-to-1, and then they're taking profits already and you're like, whoa, I didn't get any profit from that. Why are you taking profits already? Like, it's very individual between different people. And so, like, those kind of questions you could ask, but they're not going to help you that much. You should try to ask the questions that will help you. Like, ask them, why did you enter the trade at this level instead of this level? What did you see that I didn't? Ask them, what did they do to define their invalidation? You could ask them, like, generally, how they choose to take profits. And maybe they might include things like percentages and stuff, and maybe you can get a sense of that based on what you know their portfolio size is and scale it down in your head to your own portfolio. But it's not super helpful all the time. And I think that you're better off asking questions more surrounding the execution of the risk management side of the trade rather than the taking profit side. Because I think that improving the risk management side will let you experiment with the taking profit side. And ultimately, taking profits is like really subjective between different people. So it's not super helpful all the time, but I'm sure that um, some people might find some use in understanding how somebody with a certain portfolio size decides to take profits. And I know personally I am, because I asked that question to Brandon before as well, to get a sense of how much he has out by a certain time. And yeah, I hope that to some degree this gave you the agency or the drive to actually start taking these trades for yourself, rather than just waiting on some divine message from God to take your trade. So yeah, if you found value from this, be sure to again like, subscribe, and yeah, feel free to comment any questions that you have, or if you have any questions about certain parts of this that I might have glossed over. And yeah, I'm going to be making a ton of different videos about technical aspects as well as psychological aspects, for you to hopefully learn some of how I choose to do trades. And yeah, uh, tune in for more.